Chapter 1. They set down just after dawn, or whatever passed for it on this unnamed planet. The dirty light from two distant stars lay across the rocky world like smog, an early bath of murky yellow haze that did nothing to improve Noguchi's mood. It looked like gaseous piss, and even with the steady pump of adrenaline coursing through her, the intensity that came from knowing she was about to face death, she found herself wondering if it was worth it anymore. In the back, again, after so many training hunts that I could teach them myself. They waited for the signal in the main loading dock, the planet's ugly surface displayed on a small screen set into the door. Flashes of glistening black darted across the screen, raising the level of greedy anticipation in the stuffy, over-warm air. Noguchi tried to breathe evenly, wishing that the masks had a better filter system. It was hot, dark, and she couldn't get away from the hunter's mask. Dayashui, they called it, along with a clicking sound that she couldn't pronounce. It was a cloying, animal smell, and the heat made her feel like she was bathing in it. Probably not so hot up front, where I belong. It wasn't a new thought, but it still stung. Noguchi shook herself mentally, working to slide into the focus she would need to concentrate her energy. But it wouldn't come. She felt overheated and irritated, crowded by the towering young males all around her. The suits had individual thermostats, but even at the low end they were still well over human comfort levels, and since the unnamed planet was cold by hunter standards, the others had theirs cranked up. The heat from their suits, combined with the thick, oily musk they secreted, created a humid, feral atmosphere, alive with the clicking growls of barely checked excitement. At one time, the sounds and smells had excited her too, but today it only made her wonder again if this is where she really wanted to be. Focus, focus, focus. Right. It didn't matter that she was in the back, or in the middle of the back, the worst position from which to score a kill. Didn't matter that she bore Broken Tusk's mark and was still hunting from the least honourable position. Stop it. Focus or die. You can't have both. Beneath the sweaty face mask, Noguchi gritted her teeth, silently cursing her wounded pride. It wasn't the time or place to be bemoaning her lot or letting her emotions take over. This was a queen hunt. It wouldn't be scored, not burner only, but that didn't mean it was going to be a walk. She kept her gaze front and centre, finding Topknot's raised claw and fixing on it. She couldn't see the leader from her position. Most Yautja stood 2.5 meters, some taller, but the taloned figures were visible to everybody in the pyramid formation. There were 5 half-trained novices in a line in front of her, 3 on either side. The 3 lead positions were for the more experienced hunters, where I should be. And though the leader was almost always in front, one of the 2 males behind Topknot had been unblooded on her first hunt. Even then, she'd outranked him, and on the last hunt, she'd killed 6 drones, only 1 behind Topknot himself. But being Uman, as they called it, meant that she'd pulled rearguard. Again. At least you're here. He could have denied you even this. There are 20-something trainees just hissing to take your spot. Better to place low than not place at all. There was a shuddering rumble all around, the metallic floor shaking underfoot, and a flash of brilliant light on the small view screen as the ship's weapons laid down cover. Topknot chittered a command, and the other Yautja raised their burners, growling excitedly, jostling each other in anticipation. Topknot signed as he spoke, one of the simple gestures that were specific to hunting. Prepare, was the gist of it. The raised claw twisting back and forth, the talons curled into a fist. Noguchi held her own burner high, the dark metal of the alien rifle hot and heavy in her hands, feeling her heart start to beat faster. A glance at the screen showed an increase in lithe movement as another rumble shook the ship, as beams of burning light from the carrier shot into the early morning haze and black bodies flew. Topknot let out a battle cry, a guttural shriek of bloodlust that pierced the wet heat and brought the others to a frenzy point. More screeching cries and violent hisses filled the shadowy dock. the musk smell growing thicker as the hunters screamed, shaking back their rope-like locks, holding their weapons high. The passion, the hunger was impossible to ignore, and Noguchi let it in. Her own howling voice lost in the furore, joyously reminded of the reason she joined with them in the first place. She wasn't Yautja, and maybe they hated her for it, but she shared this one thing with them, this religion of spirit that defined her deepest self. The hunt. The kill. Still screaming, Topknot opened the door and they plunged out into the hazy morning light, 1,000 dark drones running to meet them and howling their own warrior cries, teeth dripping and arms grasping. Noguchi picked her first target and fired, feeling nothing but alive. The Queen had called all of her minions home, and though the ship was less than 100 meters from the hive, they had to fight for every centimeter. Even from her guarded position, Noguchi took out 5 within the first minute, and the unblooded were killing beyond their wildest expectations. Even though it wasn't to be officially scored, there was some small honor in numbers. The hive was in a marshy area, and the splashes of the spiny, taloned bugs as they came was a pounding storm, tails whipping up muck, shining exoskeletons mottled with black mud. They didn't come in waves, but in a wave. There was no lull in the onslaught, no time to breathe between kills. It was a tsunami of needle teeth and razor claws of grinning, trumpeting death. Noguchi didn't think. She danced, swirling and fainting, spinning and firing explosive heat through the wall of bodies. Behind to the left, a shrieking, elongated skull blown into shards, claws and arms flying in multiple directions, legs smashed and falling, grinning metal teeth shattering. An alien chest bursting with a splash of green acid, the blood hitting the murky water, the swamp turning to bubbling steam before the hunters had gone 1/3 of the distance. The fire from the ship continued to clear a path through the worst of it, but there was no break in the running bodies. Like ants or bees, the drones sacrificed themselves to protect their Queen Mother, an individual's life meaningless to the good of the hive. They came from everywhere at her beckoning, alerted by some pheromone or telepathy. Not even the hunters knew. The sense of slime and musk, of fire and some dark and unnatural thing, of alien, filled the hot, close space inside Noguchi's mask. She didn't smell it, didn't feel the steaming heat, didn't see anything except the next target, and the next as the small band of hunters pushed on to the nest, leaving broken, bleeding creatures in their wake. As the wall of animals began to thin, Noguchi didn't notice. She was too intent on the blast of blue-white heat coming from the end of her burner, the crash of imploding light that tore into each hard alien body and left it dying or dead. Topknot had topped at the mouth of the huge, high, rounded shell made of sleek and dusky alien secretion, the Queen's egg-laying chamber and home. The drones wouldn't risk damaging the eggs. They were still coming, but the recklessness of their attack had dropped. However they communicated with their Queen, they knew to be careful the closer they came to the nest. Another bug down, another screaming, clutching monster rushing at her, and she was shoved roughly aside. "Hey, damn it!" Noguchi stumbled hard, her concentration blown for the half-second it took her to realize what had happened. She reflexively brought her burner up, pointed it at her assailant, but didn't fire. Fucking bastard. The competition for kills on the hunt was fierce, but there had been no call for what the Yautja had done. Except for a very few, the drones had broken off their attack. It gave her ample time to hate him as he took out the drone in her stead. Shorty. Of all the novices, he was the one most often singled out as a target by the others. He was barely a head taller than she, distinctly undersized, and in the weeks that his group had trained under Topknot, he'd gone out of his way to take all his frustrations out on her. "Elosede, Pauk!" Noguchi snarled at him, the Yautja equivalent of "fuck you." She'd heard it often enough. Shorty let out a steam of derisive language. She caught only part of it. Pure de Amada, soft meat, a slur for a human, and a negative Yautja sound for female. She wasn't particularly insulted until she heard her own words echoed back at her. Le. Hey, damn it! Ka tonde! He laughed, then an imitation of human laughter, a braying mockery. Yautja didn't laugh like that. Like mimicry, it was meant to offend. There wasn't time to dwell on it. Topknot had already stepped into the gaping black mound of the hive, and one of the other blooded was motioning the trainees inside, covering, only a few dozen bugs still attempting to get close to them. Noguchi shoved past the laughing hunter, forcing her anger aside as the thick stench of rotting animal flesh washed over her from the darkness. Nests were dangerous, and being pissed at Shorty would take up too much of her awareness. Doesn't matter. Let him laugh. He didn't know how much better at the hunt she was than he, and with any luck, she'd soon find opportunity to demonstrate. And even as she thought of it, she saw a glistening string of liquid drip down from above, a long and sticky drop that spooled past her, almost invisible in the thick shadows. Topknot and most of the others were several meters in front of her, edging into deeper shadow. And as she leapt to one side, raising her burner, the drone dropped from above, landing in a crouch only a few meters away, but not facing her. It was silent and quick, its body blending into the dusky light, and Shorty didn't see it until it reached for him. Noguchi allowed herself a second of total satisfaction as the drone snatched at Shorty's arm, its claws landing heavily on his burner, blocking him from defense. An experienced hunter might have still had a chance. There were wrist blades, but Shorty was basically fucked. What goes around? She was in position, and she waited a beat longer until she was absolutely sure that he understood how badly he'd screwed up. She wished she had more time to savor it, but the revenge, however sweet, was still secondary to survival inside the hive. She took a deep breath, and then she did the worst thing she could possibly do to Shorty. The blast from her weapon caught the bug in its abdomen, its snaking green guts blown off into the dark. Even when the alien screamed from outside, Noguchi could hear the gangly body clatter to the floor, and the silent appraisal from the hunters behind her was a palatable thing. No way they'd missed what had happened. The mask hid her grin, and there was no point in laughing. If there was any greater dishonor in clan etiquette, she'd never heard of it. Not only had he been denied an honorable death, his peers and betters had just seen him have his fighting done for him, and by an alien no less, one even smaller than he. Shorty stood perfectly still, head tilted down at the drone body. One of the other young males started to laugh, a clattering, trilling sound that always made her think of a bird with a broken windpipe trying to sing. He was quickly joined by the others. Not so much fun being laughed at, is it? Noguchi shot a look at the assembled hunters in time to see Topknot signal "enough" and growl a command to Shorty. She only recognized the sound of his name, but she knew what Topknot had asked even before Shorty walked stiffly toward the leader. He'd been assigned to be in the middle of the hive line, protected front and back. He wouldn't laugh at her any more, but it would be wisest not to let her guard down until Shorty was blooded and gone. She almost felt bad for him, but reminded herself that if he wasn't such an asshole, she would have let him die. He deserved the dishonor for being such a goddamn bully. Topknot signaled for them to proceed, Noguchi taking her position second to last, Shorty's place. When someone screwed up in battle, the other Yautja generally congratulated each other on getting a better spot, a growling, shoving version of high five. But no one would look at her, and as they started down the entry tunnel, the temperature and humidity rising with each uneven step, Noguchi felt as isolated and ignored as usual. Doesn't matter. I don't need their approval to hunt, and if I wanted friends, I would have left Ryushi with the colonists, gone back to Earth, where she'd never had any friends. Before they'd gone 10 meters, all of her defenses were securely back in place. The Queen was close, and the thrill of knowing she'd be facing a Queen Mother again, even as part of a team, would go a long way to compensate for the loneliness of the past year. The drones were as stupid and mindless as ants. But the egg layer, the queen, an opponent worthy of respect, cunning and resourceful, and one she felt more of a connection to than any of the Yautja she'd encountered, with the exception of the one they'd called Dachande, Broken Tusk. The one who died after blooding her, after the massacre on Ryushi. The one who'd led her to believe that the Yautja were a race capable of appreciating any skilled hunter, no matter what species. Behind her, Scar clattered an angry warning for her to move faster, and kicked at the back of her leg. It would have hurt if she hadn't stepped quickly forward at the sound of his voice. As unpopular as Shorty was Yautja. And even after such a monumental fuck-up, he was still more popular than she. So much for appreciation. Noguchi clenched her jaw and reminded herself that the queen was close.